Here we go.
Hey, all.
Just barely made it.
You're not the only one.
Never can seem to find the link at the last minute. Okay, we've got a couple more minutes.
Okay.
I assume that's Elizabeth lurking behind the historic preservation label. Silence. Are you there, Elizabeth? There she is. Hi, Elizabeth.
How is everyone tonight?
Good.
Great.
Wow. Who is here under the historic preservation name that's no image?
Good question.
Admin, sorry. That
Oh.
part doesn't show.
Okay, because there's HPC admin also. Okay, so we got two. All right, that's fine. We're good. We're covered.
They're both my accounts.
Hey, Paul, we can see Paul.
Hey guys.
Hey.
Yes. What was that? Wait a few more seconds before starting the meeting.
So, do you guys have two Paul Filisettis on your screen?
Yes, you
One
do.
with and one without?
Yes.
Okay. I assume only one of you will speak at a time.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for joining our meeting being held by a Zoom webinar. This is the regular June meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission. The commission is charged with establishing a local historic preservation program, integrating historic preservation into local, state, and federal planning and decision-making processes. The Historic Preservation Program is designed to promote the preservation of historic and prehistoric sites, structures, objects, buildings, and historic districts. The Historic Preservation Commission is composed of volunteers from Missoula's neighborhoods, businesses, and preservation professionals. It was established by the Missoula City Council in 1869. As chair, when I call for public comment, please use the raise or lower hand feature to let me know if you wish to be recognized. I will allow you to talk and you'll need to unmute your mic. If you have joined us by phone today, you can raise and lower your hand by pressing the *9 and mute and unmute using *6. If you are participating by phone, I'll call on you by reading the last 4 digits of your phone number. If you are participating by computer, I'll call the name that was listed when you entered our webinar. And when I'm calling on you as a phone participant, once again, I'll use your last four digits of the phone number. So with that said, let's move into the agenda for tonight's meeting. First of all, I've already called order, and let's have the roll call, please.
Steve Adler,
Here?
Kathy Bickenhauser. Here. Paul Felicity,
Here.
James McDonald,
Here.
Lee Frederickson,
Here.
Patrick Swart is absent. John
Elizabeth?
Shees,
Okay,
John Shees is absent. Kent Watson,
here.
Jackson Hill,
Here.
and we have a quorum.
Thank you. Do we have, see, on the minutes, we had no meeting in May, so we have the April minutes. Is there a motion to approve those? Is there any corrections or revisions to those minutes? Do I have a motion to approve?
I so move.
Second?
Second.
Kathy seconds. All in favor? Aye.
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 This is the point in the agenda where if there's anybody from the public, and I see nobody on our screen, but this is the standard place in the agenda where anybody in the public who wishes to comment on anything not already on the agenda is asked to let us know and give us their comments at this time. And you can see on the screen there how to join the webinar and what the procedures are for being recognized if you wish to make a comment at this time. And I see none. Thank you, admin, for sharing that screen so people know what to do. We move now to new business. This is the public hearing for 508 South 3rd Street West, Historic Preservation Permit application for exterior restoration. And the recommended motion is to approve. And I'll turn this over now to our wonderful new Historic Preservation Officer, Elizabeth Johnson. Hi, Elizabeth.
I can't thank you. Give me 1 second to pull this up. Sorry, guys, bear with me here. All right, guys, I'm sorry. Give me 1 more second. I can't seem to get it to actually share.
Yeah, your mic is coming through better. So that's, if you can figure out the share screen thing, we're good to go.
Are you guys seeing that?
Yes.
Question is, are you seeing it as a slideshow? Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and go through as long as you guys can see something on the screen. You should see my title page for 508 South 3rd Street West. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
All right, so this is the HPP for 508 South 3rd Street West. And while it is mostly just maintenance, because there is a lot planned here, I thought it best to do a full HPP to give y'all a chance to review it. In my staff opinion, all of the maintenance is good and is working to restore the building while keeping the character defining features intact. So if it'll change slides for me, maybe it won't. There we go. All right, so the applicant is Jesse Dodson, and I do believe he is here with us tonight as an attendee. I don't know if we can get him brought in. Soraya. While they work to figure that out, I'll just keep moving through it. So the property is within the McCormick Neighborhood Historic District between Orange and Cottonwood Streets, which you can see right here. Legal notice for this public hearing was posted in the Missoulian on May 16th and May 23rd. On-site posting was completed 15 days prior, and affected property owners within 150 feet were notified about the project via mail. The zoning is a C14 AR overlay, and it is subject to review because this is an alteration of a building within an adaptive reuse district. So here's a map showing where the property is located. Sorry, the red dot didn't come through very large there. For a little background on the property, historically, it is known as the Thornton Hospital or Thornton Apartment Building. It is significant because of its association with Doctors Charles and William Thornton, two physicians that were prominent in the early history of medicine in Western Montana. And it's a primary contributing structure within the McCormick Neighborhood Historic District. It was originally constructed in 1909 and converted into a hospital building in 1917, 1918. It remained a hospital until 1923, when it returned to its original use as apartments. It was listed on the Missoula Inventory of Historic Resources on January 9th, 2020. This is just a Sanborn map from 1912 showing where the original apartment building was situated. For the proposed work on the front facade or the south elevation, is to restore a good deal of the front porch. As it is, a lot of the existing material is non-original and non-historic. Since the original materials are unknown at this time, all wood will be replaced with period appropriate substitution, such as stained tongue and groove wood planking. So if you don't hear me mention the specifics, that just applies to all of the front porch restoration. So the plan ultimately is to replace the non-original entry steps, which you can see right here with the number 1, with wood frame stairs, replace the front porch floors and ceiling, as well as the floor for the second floor balcony. If you can see those, I don't know if you can with my mouse there. They're going to repair and repoint the brick masonry as needed. Any removed brick will be replaced in kind. And then they will replace the non-original iron railings on the front porch, which will ultimately just add to the safety of the front porch entry. Other maintenance items for the front facade here include restoring the wood cornice, as well as restoring the front porch columns. Those will be done using the gentlest means available, a gentle cleaning, light scraping and sanding in preparation for a new coat of paint. The work on the east and west elevations will be fairly similar for both sides. Both sides have a lateral crack that needs to be repaired, which you can see in the photo right here. So they'll remove the concrete parapet cap and the brick courses above that lateral crack and replace in kind. They'll replace all double hung windows with new double hung double pane windows. This is just a representative example of the condition of the windows throughout the building. If the exact match cannot be found for the windows, the applicant will work with SHPO to determine an appropriate replacement. Additionally, they will repoint and repair the brick masonry on both sides of the building. If we move over to the east elevation, you can see a similar problems with the lateral crack, and then they have the leaning parapet wall that you can see right here. On the east elevation, they'll also be repairing the iron railings that are around these lowest level windows, as well as replacing the basement stairwell railings, which are non-original, but are in need of repair, and you can't see them in this photo, unfortunately. Sorry, it's taken a minute to switch slides. All right, for the north elevation, the masonry, as you can see here, is in need of extensive repointing, particularly on this northeast corner. Inside of the exterior stairwell right here, there are 3 doors, 1 on each floor, that will be replaced with matching wood doors. Nothing too extensive there, just replacing the doors. So really, as you can see, it is fairly minimal repairs, but like I said, it's just wanted to bring it to y'all to make sure that we give you a chance to review it. It is a fairly large number of repairs, though ultimately it's the kind of repairs we'd like to see done to help restore our historic buildings. With regards to our local criteria for review, I found that the historical architectural features and integrity of the building will not be adversely affected, as these alterations aim to maintain and restore the character of the site. Where original materials need to be replaced, they will be replaced in kind where possible, or a close match, which will be done in consultation with SHPO as necessary. For the Secretary of Interior standards, which I know you guys are all familiar with, it's pretty straightforward. For standard 1, the property will continue to be used for its historic purpose. For standard 2, the character will be retained and any historic materials will be replaced in kind if they have to be replaced and they can't be repaired. For standard 3, the property will continue to be a physical record of its time. There's no plan to take anything away that has gained historic significance in its own right. Distinctive features will be restored and maintained. Deteriorated features will be repaired where it's possible, such as repairing and repointing the brick and restoring the wood columns, so that as little is replaced as possible, which satisfies standard 5 and standard 6. There are no chemical treatments planned, and where physical treatments are necessary, such as cleaning the wood, they'll be done in the gentlest means available in preparation for new paint. There will be no digging required for this project and no new additions, so standards 8, 9, and 10 aren't applicable to this project. That being said, the cumulative effect, the intent of the project is the alteration of a historic building in accordance with the Secretary of Interior standards for the rehabilitation of historic properties. The scope of the work, generally speaking, is masonry restoration on all elevations using in-kind materials, replacing non-historic front entry steps, porch floor and ceiling, and the second floor balcony floor with period accurate wood. They'll restore woodwork around all the doors and windows, replacing double hung windows with matching windows, replacing the iron railings on the front porch and exterior basement stairwell railing, and restoring the front porch columns and second floor balcony balustrade. They'll remove the concrete parapet cap and brick courses on the east and west elevations and replace in kind. So the conclusion is that this project does substantially meet the Secretary of Interior standards. And the staff recommendation is that the exterior restorations be approved. We have this lengthy conclusion here, which just recaps pretty much everything I just covered in the presentation. So that is my presentation. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions from commission members?
Do you know if they'll be doing any work on the interior, or is this is the whole scope of work right here?
They will be doing work on the interior. The exterior is the extent of what we cover for review for the HPC.
Okay.
And I don't know if y'all can hear me, but this is Jesse Dodson. Hi, Steve.
Hi.
I can give you a little more detail on that. We're planning a pretty substantial restoration of the interior. Currently, the building is 16 apartments that, and the building has obviously been reconfigured over the decades. There's a large central corridor that's pretty wide. It's very nice. And we are maintaining that in place. We did go through the Part 1 and Part 2 approval process with the Department of Interior, and we do have a Part 2 approval for a pretty substantial scope of work for the interior as well. Okay. That'll include actually converting the 16 apartments into 22 apartments without expanding the footprint or the height of the building and without impacting that central corridor. What we're essentially doing is moving some partition walls between units and creating some additional studio apartments out of what are some now 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments. But it will involve a restoration of the interior central corridor, according to the Department of Interior standards, as well as, substantial renovations to the unit interior as well. And it will also include a complete replacement of the plumbing and electrical systems in the building, which are failing at this point.
Jesse, thank you for responding to those questions. I'm sure we'll be some more. I just wanted to give the commission members a chance to ask anything of Elizabeth, and then we'll come back to you if that's okay.
Of course.
Kathy.
Thank you very much for the restoration on this building. I drive by it frequently and I've always liked it. It's very nice utilitarian building. So I'm pleased to see all this work. I did have a question about the windows. I assume they're all currently wood windows, and I was just curious what you were going back with.
Can I go ahead and respond to
Yeah,
that?
go ahead and respond to the questions.
Okay.
Questions, absolutely.
The windows will be, right now we've got a Sierra Pacific window that is aluminum clad on the outside, but it is a wood window. And from the inside, it's wood.
Thank you.
Other questions from commission members? So Jesse, if you wanted to provide a little more background or information you think that would help us understand, it's a fairly detailed project, and clearly there's a lot of information that was presented, including I lost count of the photos after scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. To such an extent I nearly forgot some other things, but it's as I'm sure the other commission members will share, it's a great thing to have someone like yourself to take on a project like this to preserve Missoula's historic legacy. But yeah, feel free to add anything else you wish to.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. I just want to say that thank you all for your time. This is not the first time, as you all know, that this project has been before the Historic Preservation Commission. This has been a labor of love. It's been a long time coming. It was over a year ago now that we were in front of you for our local historic designation. Subsequent to that, we went to City Council for our zoning approval. We've been working with the SHPO and the Department of the Interior on our Part 2 approval. All the materials that we've given you are really just a byproduct of all the things we've done up to this point. And so I think we're just very happy to be at this point and appreciative of your time and excited to move forward. We are in for building permit, and we expect to start work very, very soon.
Very good. Well, that's, certainly there's members on this board who have a much better insight on what you're up to, since they're architects and I'm not, and can fully appreciate that, as well as others who are more involved with historic preservation in fact. So this is good to hear, certainly from my standpoint. Any other questions of the applicant or of our historic preservation officer? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Steve. A second.
Second, Leif.
Leif, okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve the staff recommendation that the permit be approved. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, Kent, you're doing so great, but I just wanted to ask if you wanted to ask for any public comment.
Oh, sorry. Well, they weren't there on item 4, so I forgot to ask if they were here for the business. Was there anybody out there? Once again, we have the screen showing the public how they can chime in if they wish to. We certainly invite that.
And this is for consideration of the HPP that you have before you.
Exactly. The historic preservation permit application for 508 South 3rd West. And the applicant is available to answer questions. Seeing none, hearing none. Okay. The motion has been approved. Thank you very much, Jesse, and certainly Elizabeth for the preparation of the staff report. It's another great job project to have moving along.
Thank you all.
You're welcome to hang around if you wish, but you don't have to. It's up to you. Moving on to item 6, old business, 6.1. This is a special presentation discussion of the Fort Missoula Post Hospital. And there's, for this year, there's no motion required. We had a presentation 2 months ago by Trey Birds. That's right, it's Tress Birds. We decided it's Tress Birds, didn't we? Sorry. Just FYI, I've been involved with several nonprofits who are interested in the preservation of the what had been called the Knife River Ponds at the western end of Fort Missoula Regional Park. And we met out there on the site a few weeks ago to talk about that, but there was a high degree of interest in this project. And so I shared with them before we were on site the links that we were given by the applicants for that project, so that they had an opportunity to learn what they wanted to about the renovation of the hospital and the condos that are going to be built on the adjacent parcel. And so they had a lot of questions and concerns that I think have been shared here as well. But I just want to let you know that I was involved in that meeting, and very likely when this project comes back for a formal application, I may have to recuse myself depending on the status of where I am with those groups. But I just wanted you all to be aware of that. So let the discussion begin.
All right, Kent, if it's all right, I'll provide
Go
just
ahead.
kind of a brief overview before we hear
Sure.
from the presentation team.
That's why you're here.
So this is just for a little reminder. You first heard from the design team at the February HPC meeting, where they first provided an introduction to their project for the potential reuse of the post hospital at Fort Missoula and adding any new development to the vacant land adjacent to that site. The design team did return to the April 7th HPC meeting with an update on their project, giving us a sense of how things had developed. In response to the second presentation, several of the HPC members did provide a few key comments to the design team related to street and riparian setbacks, massing, the value of public lands, and historic interpretation on the site. Tonight, the design team is back to provide another update on how their plans have evolved and provide the HPC another chance to provide guidance and comments stemming from the Fort Missoula guiding documents that you all were provided with in advance of the April meeting. I believe that we do have Joanna O'Connell, Douglas Newby, and David Hoffman here from Trey's Birds, as well as Jamie Erbacher from the WGM group. So we'll turn it over to them now. Have they been let in as panelists? Admin?
Yes, I'm promoting them right now.
Okay, thank you.
Just FYI, since I hadn't seen them on the screen, I was not aware that they were actually going to be here tonight. So my apologies for skipping that.
And there we go.
Do I promote anyone else?
Yeah, bring Jim Pelger over. Thank you.
Sorry, how about that Diane and Gerald?
Lavelle.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is the design team and the property owner, and there will be opportunity for public comment. So it's up to Kent on how he wants to do that. But this is the design team that will be presenting. I think that completes it from the agenda perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ava.
And it, just as a Kent and others, with the public comment process, you bring up that slide every once in a while, and you get people that want to raise their hand as attendees that want to provide comment, and that's how you can also address the attendees.
Okay, thanks for the insight on that, Lavelle. And I guess at this point, it'd be helpful to us on the commission to have sort of an update from the team as to where things are, and provide any additional information that you care to share with us from our last meeting 2 months ago on the project. So whoever's going to lead that off, please go ahead, and then we'll have questions from the commission, and we will give the public, if there's public members out there who wish to comment, a chance to do so.
Yeah, I believe that'd be me. Let me go ahead and try to share my screen really quickly. All right. Can everyone see that?
And do.
Awesome. Great. Well, good to see everybody again. Thanks for having us back to give you guys a quick update on this project. I'll just jump right into it here. First thing I wanted to do, and thank you, Elizabeth, for starting this a little bit, was just kind of recap the meetings we've had to date. Back in February, we did have that first HPC meeting. We talked about our firm, our past work. We summarized a number of findings we had from a fairly robust community outreach phase of the project, our municipal research and historic research. And at that meeting, we kind of in an abstract way discussed, because we didn't really know at the time, what the potential development proposal was going to be for this site. Our second meeting in April, we presented a standalone PDF that's still out for anyone interested to go take a look at. That includes the full proposal, including all of our community outreach, municipal research, and historic research. And just to summarize the kind of key points of that right here, the number one thing was and remains a full renovation and preservation of the post-hospital, as faithful to its historic design as we can be, and in keeping with the Secretary of the Interior standards for renovations. Also being proposed is roughly 10,000 square feet of new commercial space, and then 15 for-sale residential units. At that meeting, we also discussed the kind of municipal process we're going to use to hopefully achieve this, and that would be a PUD. We talked about what that kind of looks like and the limitations on it, including that it's very specific to our site and doesn't change anything else in the fort outside of the boundaries of our site. Most recently, we sat down with a maybe less formal staff meeting with a few members of the HPC and a couple of city officials. This was on the 14th, where we kind of built on some of the comments that were made at the second one and had a maybe more detailed discussion of the proposal that we've had. We're going to go through a couple of the slides that we mentioned in that presentation, and then we'd like to discuss some of the specific concerns that came out of that meeting. Again, building on this second sort of formal meeting that we had back in April. So what we talked about at that last meeting in May 14th, this is our site as it exists right now. I'm going to kind of trace the outlines here. It's this the whole grounds around the post hospital, And then also this sort of unimproved lot just to the right of it in this image. And our property line stops about here in front of the Child Development Center. And our rear property line is against this kind of edge of the river over here. This is what we have on the site currently. And this is our proposal for the site. Hospital and the grounds, as we've mentioned before, it's really important to us to not only maintain the hospital faithfully, but to maintain the grounds around it, as that's a very significant part of the reason it's contributing to this historic district. We're proposing, this would be the commercial space, that 10,000 square feet I was talking about earlier. Proposing that on this sight line over here. And then the townhomes are spread out and pushed to the back of the site as not to be as impactful as the rest of the project. We also talked about a couple renderings that we put together. So this particular one would be standing right about here on this corner, looking into the site. A couple notable things here. There's the post-hospital and the grounds we're preserving as best we can. This would be the commercial space over here. We're looking at, again, very low density, low slung buildings as not to be competing with the hospital itself. And the other thing that's relevant about this picture is we're starting to make like a reference here to some of these sort of interpretive sites we'd like to start including in this proposal. This would be for instance, maybe a bike rack that starts to talk about and reference the history from the 25th Infantry Buffalo Soldiers and the kind of things they did in the Missoula area, particularly around bikes. And we're going to talk about that a little bit further on in this presentation again. This is another rendering we put together to kind of demonstrate what this might start looking like. To back up to this rendering would be sort of right here on this corner looking into the lot. So, again, as faithful as a restoration of the post-hospital as we can do, our intention with the post-hospital is to convert the upper stories to leasable offices, very similar to what's going on the rest of the site. Again, that's to keep in line with what's present there, but also that was a decision we made because that would be the least impactful kind of renovation we could do to that building. The lower levels, we do want to open up to the public with some sort of public facing program, perhaps like a small cafe, something like that. And that's what you're seeing a gesture of out here is that, maybe that spills out into some open tables out in the lawn just to the right side of this building. I would add in both of these images, you can see the hint of the massing of the townhomes in the background. Again, these are kind of, go back to the 3D massing, pushed to the farthest edges of the property away from the what's thought of as the historic core. And the idea here is both in form and with our new landscaping we're proposing, that these really blend into the background. What you're going to see at the back of this site is actually an old growth forest, really tall, mature trees, and have the townhomes try to blend into that background. So, we go back to the two renderings, you can see them kind of tucked in there between the old growth forest in the far background and our new proposed landscaping, and keep with forms, gable forms that are similar massing to stuff that's out on the site. So that covers what we really presented in that last meeting. There were a number of points that we discussed, and I wanted to highlight a few of them here and what we're doing to address them. We are changing a little bit the citing of our proposal in order to accommodate some of these, and I think the whole team thinks these are changes for the better here. But roughly speaking, there was a lot of talk about the setbacks, particularly of the commercial spaces, where those are landing on our site right now. There was this idea of vistas as being a really critical component of the fort. And I think the request was made of us to do more to enhance those and preserve the ones that are there. We talked a bit about open space and public access, just in terms of how the public can interact with various aspects of our site and the proposal. And then we did talk about siting relative to other fort buildings. So how the new development we're proposing adjacent to the post hospital would compare to other things that are already present on the fort. So we're going to kind of go through each of those. I want to talk to you guys about them and what we're doing to maybe enhance these aspects of our project. So starting with setbacks and vistas. This was our original plan. This is the one that everybody's seen to date. The main concern here is that these commercial buildings are closer to the road than most things at the fort. I think the initial recommendation was that we look at OP3 as a starting point for kind of improving the way we're doing setbacks. And OP3 would require a 30-foot buffer between the property line and the buildings we have here. And then the other thing we talked about was vistas in terms of views through the site. You know, one that we've talked about a lot and we intend on maintaining is this kind of straight shot through the large driveway in front of the post hospital. Maintaining this has always been part of our proposal, and it's something we intend to continue doing, as well as the grounds all around it. But looking at vistas on the site as a whole, so this is from the historic register. That was the older one, 72, I believe. The street that runs, so this is our site down here, that's the post hospital, very tiny. The street that runs perpendicular to our site here is one of the more major accesses that kind of defines the layout of the fort itself. So we wanted to make reference to that and improve this sort of view corridor through our site. So we're proposing changing what we had originally talked about in two ways. One would be pushing this or enforcing this 30-foot setback per the OP3 requirements. What that does to our massing is it makes this building a little thinner, and we can make it a little bit longer to maintain our performance numbers, but it pushes everything back that 30 feet. And then the other thing we would like to consider doing here would be maintaining this sort of axis to create this vista view corridor between the buildings on our site. So in the commercial spaces, that's pushing these guys apart a little bit to make this this break that matches up with the road. You can just see the hint of it right over here. And then with the residential units down here, we'd be pushing them apart to ensure that that break is continuous through the site. So if you go back up to our original proposal here, we had this block of 4 right in the middle. We'll be moving that around, moving this over here to create that opening between here. And we're hoping that that move can start to relate a little more to the overall organization of the fort and maybe preserve some of these vistas we've been discussing. The next piece we discussed a little bit was this idea of public access and open space. So I wanted to take a look at our site plan here in terms of how we're intending to connect to various walking paths that are already present around the fort. And I wanted to start to maybe develop this idea of these interpretive sites, these things that are starting to reference. We've talked a lot about the idea of there being like a hidden history here, you know, prior to the early 1900s building push. And we'd like to start to include these interpretive sites within our site and within this walking path around our project to start to identify that and bring it to people's attention. So that's what these red dots are referencing here, is these potential locations for these interpretive historic sites. This one up here was the one we talked about earlier, where, you know, maybe we have a bike rack that can start to reference the 25th Infantry Division. Otherwise, there's a couple main connection points. One would be enhancing this pathway on this side, the north side of our project site, to connect back to Officers Row, and then also connect to this side, which would go up towards the museums, things like that. The other piece we'd like to really create a connection to would be the river down over here. I believe the closest access point to the river or to a walking trail to the river lands like somewhere off the screen over here. I think having a pathway that connects to that through our site is something we'd be really interested in doing. And then obviously connecting the post hospital to all of these things, again, making the lower levels of that something that is accessible by the public and can be used by the public to experience this building, which currently they cannot. In terms of open space, we've been talking a lot about improved open space, and I wanted to clarify a little bit what I meant by that. So this is a view, if you were standing in the street right here, looking north towards what is really like an improved landscaping thing, typical of that kind of section of the fort, right? Manicured lawns, very manicured trees, things are being irrigated. It's clearly being taken care of in a very real way. We feel like this is more representative of the fort's historic value. If you turn around and look back at our site, you can see there's a pretty stark difference. These trees are definitely not being maintained. They're not kept to the same level that the other ones are. You can see a transformer box just hanging out here on the side of the street. There's no pathway, there's no curb even over on this side. Really hard to tell in this picture, but there's overhead power lines that cut right across the middle of the site. So when we say improved open space, that's what we're talking about, bringing this situation as it exists right now up to this kind of level, sort of befitting of the historic value that this area has. To that end, we started to break out a little bit in terms of what we're going to be adding in this, again, this improved open space idea. So that's this big green block over here. That's taking all of the undeveloped site that looks like this currently and bringing it up to a really high standard. Also, as a part of that would be preserving and maintaining everything around the fort, all of these grounds that are really important to its significance as a historic structure.
So real quick before we move on, from just a couple metrics on that. I think we're what we're calling the restored public landscape. So even the stuff that's around the post hospital right now is in need of restoration in order to bring it back up to its historic quality. Roughly 1.9 acres of restored landscape, and then adding 0.6 acres of the entirely new improved public landscape. So what you're seeing in the bright green and sort of the existing, the intention is for those areas to be publicly accessible and really brought up as an amenity for the public. So we're looking at about 2.5 acres of real improvement here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and this was a diagram kind of hinting at what's really available to the public here. So, the light blue is really space that anyone from the public can walk around as much as they would like. Again, this is all private property, and our intention here is to really make this a public-facing development. We want to invite the public in. We want to make this a part of the public nature that's just really intrinsic into the character of the fort. So, the hospital as it is right now, this would be a red zone because no one's allowed in there. It's not accessible to the public at all, and we want to at least open up the lower levels to the public. So all of this blue space is, completely free public space. And then these darker ones, these would be sort of like public facing, but commercial space, like a restaurant is a public space, but not as freely accessible as like a park. And then the last thing we want to touch on here is just the massing and siting of a number of different buildings around the fort. And per the suggestion of the HVC when we last talked, we started looking at the fort in terms of some figure ground studies. So this is the fort as it exists right now. And one of the things we noticed as we started looking into this, and particularly into the architectural push in the early 1900s, Officers Row over here, the Forest Service buildings, this section and the way this was designed and laid out is really conducive, less to the concept of an open fort where there's vistas just out in every direction, and more towards the idea of a number of perimeter buildings surrounding a common green space. And that's really what this is right now. It's this beautiful manicured lawn that's bordered by these buildings that, to a degree, the buildings in the landscape sort of perform or become like the wall that's surrounding this big communal open space over here. And if you look at this with that sort of mindset, this perimeter of historic buildings that wraps around really kind of like breaks off across our site before picking up at the CDC Center over here. So in that sense, and this is the figure field with our buildings here in blue, I think the development we're proposing, especially in terms of the commercial spaces, can really help to enhance and mirror sort of the feel or context that's going on, particularly in the officers row zone of the historic fort. And then to supplement that, we took our site plan here, just a quick figure ground, and we compared it to a number of other conditions on the fort. So this is a 1-to-1 scale if you pulled out our site and then put it right next to officers row. And the reason we wanted to show this is you can get a sense of the massing of these buildings over here. The bigger ones starting to kind of line up with approximately the size of some of these blocks of townhomes we're looking at right now. Another thing we looked at would be the U.S. Army parcels. So this is the Rocky Mountain Heritage building right here. That would be like up in this corner of the fort. To start talking about the massing of our commercial spaces and how those are lining up with these sort of longer, low-slung buildings built during the CCC era. This is the massing of the Nrhc and Heritage Hall. Again, kind of matching up with these guys and just in terms of their footprint.
I'll also say on both this one and the previous one, just some proximity of these longer footprints to roads. So both at the U.S. Army parcels and at the Heritage Center, we do have these longer buildings with entries facing the road, but they're kind of right up against those roads.
Yeah, we did want to talk about that fairly extensively because it's something we've noticed at several different spots in the fort, that buildings, especially long buildings, are typically oriented or can be oriented towards the road parallel to it with their entry off the road. This is the Child Development Center. This is the Historical Museum. Again, very long, low-slung building, very similar massing to what we're talking about for the commercial spaces. Located really adjacent to a road with an entry right off it. And the Northern Rockies Heritage Center, adjacent to Heritage Hall. Also a very similar condition, being up against a road here, a long piece. You could even look at the Forest Service buildings as being a part of that typology, given that the view you have from the road is of a fairly long building. We're not proposing anything as tall as this, but similar massing and similar sort of entry sequence off this pathway, pedestrian walkway. And on those, when we start to look at sort of density and open space, this is the lot for the cell blocks. The Forest Service buildings, and just comparing that to the space we're keeping between buildings, it starts to we're not competing with this level of density on our site at this point. And yeah, I believe that's as far as we've gotten at this point. I guess I can pass it back to Kent and take some questions.
Yeah, thank you, David. Appreciate the update on all of that. Are there questions from commission members of the team? And it would help me if you could have each of your team members introduce themselves themselves and to what their particular involvement with the project is. And I have appreciation for your consultant team as a whole.
Absolutely. Apologies for not doing that first. Yeah, so from Traceburns, we have myself, architect and project manager. We have Douglas Newby is on the call with me as well. Also an architect and project manager. I believe Joanna was on, but she sent me a message saying she was having some connection issues. I can't see her on my screen right now. Yeah. So that's.
And then I think we have Jamie from WGM on as well, Jamie Erbacher, who we've been collaborating with on this.
We also have Jim Pelger on as well.
And yeah, Jim, if you want to say hi, Jim is one of the development partners.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And Jamie, you're a planner at WGM, is that correct?
Yes, Kent, that's correct. And
We've
then
got-
at some point in time, we'll be bringing Kate Dinsmore on for landscaping consultant too.
Okay, well, she's a landscape architect, not a landscaping consultant. She's a licensed professional landscape
Right,
architect. Please get that title
Yeah.
correct. I'm very sensitive about that as a professional landscape architect myself. I would appreciate that. In that regard, I apologize for bristling, but it's something that we need to remind people of all the time, and it's important. Is Kate involved in inventorying the trees that are already there?
We have not involved her in inventory of the trees yet, but we have not done any sort of removal of any trees or disturbance of them. So we will involve her with that.
Because that's going to be one of the things, those of us who've been here since the 90s recall the major uproar when trees were proposed to be removed, and that a large part of that discussion and uproar was based upon the lack of knowledge about what was already there and what had to come out by virtue of their species and age. So it's important. I'm just conveying my own personal view on this, but it's important that a complete understanding of the trees that are on site be known before you get too far along with this project. So with that said, I will open it up to others on the commission to ask questions.
And if I can, before you guys get into your questions, I just want to state for the record that the meeting of May 14th was staff only. There were no members of the HPC present.
Thank you for that clarification, Elizabeth. I was curious about that, so I'm glad you clarified that. Questions from the commission? Comments? Concerns? I cannot believe this.
Do we take that as approval then?
I think my biggest concern is, before we even get to talking about character and appropriateness, is the upcoming process that I understand it's going to go through a PUD process first. And then, assuming that's successful, it will turn into an HPP application. I'm assuming the Preservation Office or the commission itself will be asked to comment on the PUD, which is going to be more of a matter of use, I believe, than character. And maybe this is a question for you to follow up on, Elizabeth, is if we give comment on the PUD, I don't want that to be deemed as prejudicial when it comes to an HPP application. And so I'd like to check with the city attorney's office and see if there's any guidance on that.
Yeah, as it stands right now, once the PUD application is in, we would want to hold an HPC meeting to gather agency comment.
Okay,
I will look into it further on how we avoid the issue that you just mentioned.
okay, yeah, because we've had one bad experience already, and I'd like to avoid that. So,
Anybody else? Do we have anybody on the public who's outside in the waiting room waiting to comment?
I do have a question. This is Leif.
Go ahead.
I'm curious how, I mean, speaking about these as like public spaces and that sort of thing, what is there some sort of easement that is created to ensure that they remain that way, or what's the long-term view of how those remain public or semi-public space? I mean, I know that they're privately owned, but you're speaking of making them into public spaces. So I'm just wondering how that's ensured over a long period of time.
My understanding is part of the PUD process will include us having the ability to write it, things like you're describing, and that would be our intention. We have no intention of developing to any higher density than this. The PUD that we apply for will not allow us to develop any higher density than this without going through this process over again. And I believe the design and the development team would be very interested in, writing in the sorts of things you're saying, that these are preserved as public spaces.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Well, I appreciate the team being present to bring us up to date on this, and I apologize if I sort of lashed out there. It's just a thing that I know that someone who has gone through the process of getting licensed by a state agency wants to be sure that they're recognized as such, and I just wanted to make sure that was aware. The thing I was thinking about when I was talking about the trees is that one view that you showed looking back towards the west, those trees are all Siberian elm, and they're going to have to come out regardless of whether there's a development going in or not, because yeah, those right there. I've been looking at this. I have the same view up right now on my screen on Google Earth Street View, and I'm very familiar with those, and they're all a tree which at the time when they were planted were important because they're fast growing and tough, but they don't last. They drop limbs, they're dangerous, and will have to come out. That's why I was suggesting again that Kate or an arborist or somebody get out there and inventory what you have, so you know what to keep. It will help you frame your public spaces. And Siberian elm should not be one of those, but the ones obviously across the street are worth saving and maintaining. And so I appreciate you showing the improvements that could occur as a result of going with that kind of approach.
Gotcha. Yeah. And we haven't engaged a landscape architect at this point, but that is 100% something we are going to do as we develop this project further, to hit all the points you're talking about, making sure that if we have these less than ideal species, that we're removing and replacing them, and being as faithful to the historic context around us as we can be.
Sure. And the other thing, I had mentioned this before, and I don't mean to beat the dead horse, as they say, but if you bring Kate or whomever you intend to bring in as a landscape architect, sooner than later, that person can help you with this site design, because that's what we as a profession do. And so I realize that there's a lot of circumstances where the landscape architect is brought in late in the project, and all the things have already been decided. So that's important to know.
Absolutely.
I guess if maybe before we sign off here, we could just ask, we heard from staffing meeting, consider setbacks, vistas, if you guys could elaborate on open space and just really review kind of what the figure ground of the existing site is looking relative to what we're proposing. I like to think that kind of what we're showing here is we want that feedback and what should we be proposing, and definitely willing to try to incorporate any of those concerns. So just, you know, if there's anything else we could leave with that people are concerned about, that we should be thinking about in addition to those kind of 4 things we heard from staff.
I've got one observation is that with the commercial, I appreciate that the fact you're kind of pulling the commercial apart to let a vista through there to go all the way through to the river. I like that response. The one thing I wonder is the life attached to that commercial, the activity seems to be on the backside between the commercial and the single family residential, the units. I'm wondering if you don't want the life of the commercial to be more out in the public space facing the parade grounds and the open space to the core of the it's a question. I don't know if it would work better or worse, but might be worth investigating. Is kind of where you want the public to really be visible and be active, and would that be more towards the center of the fort, or kind of on the backside of the commercial, or what seems to me the backside of the commercial if everything facing onto the core is considered the front.
And I do think, you know, we've adjusted the setbacks, so those buildings have moved further in than they are, and it's kind of splitting the difference a little bit at this point. So I do think there's an opportunity for, you know, really we want people on all sides of these buildings. So maybe at this point, with a little more massaging, we can get the activity of these buildings kind of all the way around. But, you know,
sure,
point that we need to be facing towards the parade grounds just is kind of inward facing.
Yeah. I'm just thinking more the public would probably be more engaged being on the, I guess, the north side of the commercial and having that visual and physical access to the core of it rather than be between that and the parking space. Right. It's you know, it's a suggestion. It's not.
No, it's really helpful.
Yeah, we any and all feedback.
And I do want to point out that we have an attendee who is waiting to ask a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Laval, and I think that HPC admin has to, well, you guys have the slides. I'm not exactly sure how you bring the person. There he is. Somebody who wanted to comment is in the room now. Thank you. So the hand that was raised was, I believe.
Hello. Hello. Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Great. Hi. Members of the Historic Preservation Committee. My name is Gerard P. Behrens. I appear today as a resident of the city of Missoula and one of the 1994 board members and officers of Save the Fort, and past board member of the chair of the Northern Rockies Heritage Foundation. Additionally, I've devoted numerous volunteer hours helping restore the Fort Missoula internment camp building on the grounds of the Historic Museum. I appear in opposition to the proposed new development on the grounds of the Western Montana Mental Health Center. Fort Missoula is one of the oldest historic treasures in the Missoula area. The architectural design and layout are quite similar to other fort complexes in the western part of the country. Its historical significance is derived not only from its structures, but equally to their planned layout and open spaces surrounding them. Centered by the parade grounds with the placement of the officers' row, the gymnasium, and the historic hospital arrayed around forms the core of the fort. It is our duty as heirs to this historic complex to maintain and preserve not only the buildings, but also their design spacing of the grounds surrounding them. Just as we would have not dreamed of a housing complex on the parade grounds, we should be equally adverse to development to surrounding grounds. The argument that condo and commercial development is financially necessary to fund the rehabilitation of the Fort Hospital is not a reason for degrading the Fort open space and historic nature. A sophisticated developer would have completed a feasibility study of the cost of rehabilitation before the purchase. The developer had a 3-month window to do such estimates and bid on the purchase accordingly. A word of caution, this is not a one-off proposition. An approval or acquiescence to this development will set off a very negative precedent, which would open the floodgates to much larger and higher impact developments at the fort. I urge this body to preserve the fort, its unique character, and its design of over 100 years ago. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Behrens. We appreciate your taking part in the discussion, and I appreciate your historical perspective on some of the things that have happened there at the fort. Do we have anyone else who wishes to comment?
We do have one more attendee that needs to be brought in to make comment.
Okay. I don't seem to be capable of doing that, so someone else, I guess, admin.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Introduce
I'd like
yourself.
to just say thank you for all the work that's gone into this project, but I have to agree with Mr. Behrens.
They're talking about trees and stuff. We're not talking about the big picture, you know. Yeah.
Somebody who has an open mic that's not talking right now, would you please mute your mic so we can hear this person from the public? And please introduce yourself again.
Hello, my name is Diane Stensland Bickers, and I'd like to agree with Mr. Behrens that I don't think a residential development on the fort property is an appropriate use of the land, despite the massive housing shortage we're currently experiencing in this city. That's just not appropriate use of that property. And the developer should have known that before they bought this property. I'd like to agree with Mr. Behrens and urge you not to approve this development. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Stensland. Anyone else? Okay, hearing no one else, any closing comments from the design team?
No, I think that's what we're looking for. Thanks again for all your time and working with us to help push this project forward. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate that as well. Anything further on this from the commission before we move on in our agenda? Thanks again to Trace Burns for being present to provide this latest update on the project. We move now to our next item under old business, item 6.2. And I think that both 6.2 and 6.3, there's nothing here to update unless somebody has something that I'm not aware of. Elizabeth and I talked about this last week, and it appears that we need to get both of these items moving and underway. And so I guess the thing it's probably worth bringing up, maybe I should just go by order. Do we remind me who we had as volunteers for the covenant subcommittee? I think Steve, you were interested in that. And was Paul the other one? No, not Steve. Okay. I see a head shake.
I was a little bit a part of it before I joined the commission. So I'm very interested in continuing to work on it.
Oh, that's right, Leif. I forgot about you. Since I don't see your face, I just see your name. I didn't realize that was you talking. So, okay, we have Leif, and who else was interested in working on that?
I was part of it early on also.
Okay,
the problem
Kathy.
For me is that I'm heading into my summer field season and I'm going to be gone.
I know. You're out there doing it. While we sit around and talk about it.
I'll help as much as I can. I'll have some availability issues.
Okay. Anyone else volunteering to join Leif and Kathy on the Covenant Subcommittee?
Are you suggesting we have to sign up?
No, we don't have. I just try to get a sense of who's interested in working on it, so we can maybe give Elizabeth something more to do in terms of pulling everybody together and calling a meeting or something like that. Any thoughts, Elizabeth?
No, it's just helpful to know who wants to be a part so that we can get meetings scheduled. I know Kathy's busy going into the summer, but if nothing else, I can start with Leif and see where we go from there. Kathy, we can keep you apprised via email or however we have to accommodate your schedule during the summer, and then go from there if we need to. If anyone else changes their mind who does want to be a part, just send me an email, let me know, and we'll make sure to get you included in the meetings.
Okay, great. Well, at least you have somebody who's maybe get things underway and then jump into this with more dedication as the summer advances. The second one was the planning subcommittee, and I know I'm on that, and you are as well, aren't you, Paul? I see you nodding. Now that we can see you, that's great. I mean, I should compliment you on finding the means by which we can share your image with the world. Is there anything that trying to think of the best way to approach this, because we're all busy with other things, I know, and this is something maybe Paul, maybe you and I can figure out a time with Elizabeth to kind of sit down and talk about this a bit, because this, I think, is something I know that the preservation plan will be updated, and there's other things that we need to perhaps think about. And so maybe that would be an appropriate way of moving forward.
Yeah, that sounds good. I can email you both and see if we can figure out a time to meet. I can also send out just a general polling email to see if there's anybody else who, again, changes their mind and decides to be a part of it.
And maybe, we can talk about what that committee needs to think about taking on as part of what you send out as an appeal, so that those who might be interested have some idea of what we're going to be looking at. Okay, great. Thank you. We're down to 6.4, building watch. Anybody?
Nothing on my end.
Anybody have any buildings out there that are in danger that we need to be aware of and start tracking? Okay. I guess we're down to the report. And I just realized when we started this meeting, some of us have been interacting with Elizabeth since she arrived. And we should make the public aware of the fact, because we do have some public members still participating, that Elizabeth Johnson is our new Historic Preservation Officer. You officially started the 1st of April, correct?
Correct.
And why don't you, I think we may have done this before, but it's been a couple of months since we met, and it might be helpful just to give a brief background on who you are and why you're here.
Sure. I started, as Kent said, April 1st. I moved here from Arkansas. Enjoying my first couple months here and looking forward to a beautiful summer. I am currently pursuing a PhD in public history from Middle Tennessee State University, and also come in with a strong background in history and just a master's in public history at this point. Looking forward to hopefully graduating soon, and I'm excited to be a part of the community here and working with the HPC.
Thanks, Elizabeth. That's great. We're glad to have you aboard. you know, Elizabeth and I shared a walking tour of our church, the Holy Spirit Episcopal Church, which we're thinking about getting finally registered. And so it was nice to spend some time out in the field talking about things historic, and we're so happy to have you aboard. And time now for your staff report.
All righty. So as far as general topics go, we got our CLG final progress report for the 2020-2021 grant cycle successfully submitted. So thank you all for sending over the materials for that. We have a couple big updates on historic preservation funding in Missoula. The Montana Department of Commerce awarded more than $5 million in historic preservation grants to fund 26 projects across the state. 2 projects within Missoula received funding. The Milwaukee Depot received a grant for $500,000 and $419,000 for the Missoula Art Museum. Additionally, the Historic Museum at Fort Missoula has been awarded a $533,000 grant from the National Park Service's Japanese American Confinement Sites program to help restore and reconstruct 2 original World War II alien detention center barracks. As Kent mentioned, I have spent the last couple months kind of settling in and getting to know everyone. I've met with a couple of y'all one-on-one, and we'll be scheduling meetings with the rest of you over the next few weeks, depending on your availability. So look out for an email for that. I also have a few meet and greets scheduled with the folks at the Rattlesnake Dam, Lalonde Ranch, and the Moon Randolph Homestead over the next couple months. So looking forward to getting in a little more involved with those projects. And I've also been invited to serve on the Heritage Missoula Committee, and I'm looking forward to carrying on the strong partnership with them that Emmy had started. As far as Preservation Month goes, unfortunately, this year's Preservation Month was fairly quiet due to ongoing COVID-19 restrictions, but many of the projects that were begun during that time will continue to be rolled out over the next few months. Particularly, I'm working on adapting, a few of our guided tours into self-guided tours to allow for further flexibility and use by community members. We've made sure that there's information about the Legacy Award winners from 2019 and 2020 on the website. And I'm going to be starting a digital project next week that'll highlight the past preservation award winners so that we have something public facing for those as well. As you may be aware, the Unseen Missoula tour season is off to a great start, and tours are continuing to sell out each week. So we look forward to seeing more develop with those. As far as demolition permits are concerned, staff has reviewed and signed off on 4 demo permits since we met last. The first 3 were located at 2400 River Road, 3305 Great Northern, and 521 Russell. They were not individually listed buildings, nor were they contributing structures within the historic district. The 4th demo permit was for the Reed Condos project. The applications met the mitigation requirements established in November of 2020, and staff has signed off on those permits. I will keep in communication with the permit review team as the project moves forward to ensure that the final set of preservation mitigation requirements are met prior to the approval of a building permit. And then we just have 2 project updates. The first is that 903 South First Street, the Bissinger Warehouse, was approved for inclusion on the Missoula Inventory of Historic Resources. You guys should expect to see this project as an HPP soon. And then Parks and Rec, Paul and I met with them regarding their plans for the batting cage property, and they are advancing a master plan for that. This planning process will be built on the previously approved underlying assumptions for the park, inclusive of the historic components. They'll be providing more information in the upcoming weeks about how people can engage and participate in that planning process. And I believe that's it for the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate that update. For someone who's just been on board 2 months, you've covered a lot of territory already. It's really great. Move now to any questions that anyone has of Elizabeth and her report. Okay, moving on to item 8 on the agenda, board member comments. Kathy, yay!
Sorry, I wasn't quick enough on the unmute. For the, wasn't it the Wilma that just had their 100th anniversary downtown?
They did.
Will that get included with your online update or something, Elizabeth?
Yeah, one of the things that I've been working on is compiling based off of Leif's assumption, or suggestion was the 100-year-old properties in Missoula. I'm actually getting access to Esri story maps later this week, which is the platform that I plan to use to create a digital project to highlight each of these. From there, it can fairly simply be translated into a walking tour, driving tour, whatever mode of transport you prefer to use. And that's, as of right now, that's the best project that we have moving forward to highlight that and the other properties. So if there are any properties that you guys are aware of that are celebrating their 100th year, feel free to send over any information and I can make sure that I have it on my list.
Thank you.
And just a question for you, this is Paul, just a question for you in terms of the, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I'll hold my question.
Anybody else that has a question or follow-up to Elizabeth's report? While Paul tries to remember what it was he had on his mind. Paul, you're too young for that. Anyway, moving on to item 8, board member comments. One thing I wanted to pass along to all of you, some of you have done this, I'm sure, but I had the occasion this past weekend, Friday through Monday, being the tour guide for a friend of mine who's lived in Western Montana for 20 plus years, but had never ventured into central Montana to places like Lewistown and Fort Benton. So we took in both, and I'm always impressed with the architecture in Lewistown. I mean, there's a town that epitomizes, stone masonry construction and brick buildings and terracotta surfaces and so forth. So it was wonderful to see it all again and to introduce my friend to this town right in the very middle of the state that's so historic and quite impressive in its setting and the architecture. And then, of course, Fort Benton. The museums in Fort Benton are just amazing. And I am sure I knew this, but I had totally forgotten that the Fort Benton museums are all privately funded except for the BLM Interpretive Center out at the southwest edge of town. So for that kind of museum in highly detailed historical history and artifacts and so forth to be totally funded by private funding is really an amazing thing. So I just wanted to share that with you all. I'm sure most of you have probably seen those facilities, but if you haven't, please do. And I was reminded again that the Old Trail Museum in Choteau is always worth a stop. Their paleontological section is amazing. That whole room that they have set aside for the dinosaurs and so forth is really a very well done exhibit. Once again, privately funded. That's all I've got.
Well, speaking of great museums, to put in a plug, the Historic Museum at Fort Missoula is open again. Encourage you all to check it out. And it looks like there is going to be a 4th of July celebration, although not quite as robust as previous years because we're still coming out of COVID. So there's a little kind of caution being thrown in there. But
if you make it out to the fort to look at the museum, please by all means go inside and look at the display on the Forest Service communications. And look at the display inside the museum.
Yeah.
For the Forest Service history.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth, I just have when is it Bike Walk Week in September? Is that coming up, or they'll want to have tours? Do you know?
That's a good question. I will have to look into when exactly that is.
I don't know if any of the other staff, well, do you know anything about whether they're having that this year?
I do not know that yet, but we will look into it.
Okay,
I know things are getting more active, and we can check with Missoula in Motion to see if they're doing more related to Bike Walk Bus Week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
And just while we're kind of in that general topic area of getting around town, having the west side of the Higgins Bridge open now with that big, wide pedestrian bicycle walkway is just amazing. And I was quite impressed with how that stairway turned out after all the uproar over preserving the old one and trying to incorporate it into the final design. But that new stairway really blends nicely with the detailing of the handrails and everything on the bridge itself. So I thought it came off pretty well considering all the uproar that surrounded doing that. Anybody else? One thing I wanted to bring up before we close, and I realized I didn't do this at the time when the minutes were read. I went back and looked while we were underway. From my standpoint, as someone who likes to rely on documentation for research, as I'm sure any of you that do historical research do, I think it's important that even the staff members that participate in a meeting should be listed. And I just wanted to pass that along, I think, as a valuable thing to have, so that when topics of discussion come up in the future about who was involved with a particular discussion or whatever, we know everybody that was there. And the same way for the participants. I think it is helpful for me, certainly when I look at a document, to know that individuals that were involved and who they are, just because once a record is made, it's nice to have the availability of that kind of information. And I'm just wondering if the staff or anybody has a comment or thought on that.
Well, you're testing my knowledge early on. I can look into that to see if that's something that we are able to do. Lavelle may have more comments on that, and if that's something we're even able to do.
I think you're spot on, Elizabeth. I haven't looked at the last set of minutes to see what isn't listed, like what if we don't name staff. But I can check in with the business manager and see how that's done. I know that there's a move to be even more summary on our minutes in general, so that you have a heads up on that. And that is because the recording really suffices. These visual recordings suffice as your meeting notes. So in the future, they were pretty summary before, but in the future, I think you should be looking for that they will be even more summary. But in terms of listing who is present, we can check back in on that with the business manager and see what that protocol looks like.
Okay, I just think I'm not asking for anything in terms of lengthening minutes, because I know that can be a pain. I used to be a secretary to a design review board, and I hated having to capture the meeting in minutes. And so the summary style, I think, is appropriate. I'm just thinking if you can have a list of who was there, then you know, without having to go and look at a video and spend time doing it, you can identify right away who was there. Any further announcements, news, upcoming events? We've gotten an update on the Historical Museum. Anything else? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
It's moved. I don't think it requires a second, so we are adjourned. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.